Luis Horacio Najera is an acclaimed award-winning journalist, crime analyst, and former reporter for Mexico's Grupo Reforma. His life was repeatedly threatened for his reports on the corruption and drug cartels along the U.S.-Mexico border. He has escaped to Canada in 2008. Luis won the 2010 CJFE International Press Freedom Award and is a former fellow at the Citizen Lab Canada Centre for Global Security Studies and the co-author of Wolfpack. Despite his successes, Najera still struggles with unemployment. So he'll be reading from the Wolfpack, which is a very impressive book about the cartels and the long arm of the cartels reaching indeed into Canada, in Vancouver and Toronto and so on. I was fascinated with the revelations in that book. So thank you for that. And I'll let you do your excerpt, and then we'll have a couple of questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's very it's fascinating seeing all of you here, old and new friends. Can you hear me well? Un poco más? ¿Así? Okay, perfecto. Okay, so I'm going to read the section 1 of the foreword for the Wolfpack, which I co-authored with Peter Edwards, one of the most important journalists on writing organized crime in Canada. And this is a little bit of my story. Okay, so this is section 1 of the Wolfpack. My relationship with Juan Carlos began through his attraction to my close friend. As the new kid in town, he approached me looking for a wingman to set them up. Eventually, I agreed and began organizing quick trips after class or during recess to a Mexican fast food place near our high school. I invited Juan Carlos to join us under the pretext of helping him to get to know his new peers. Despite his efforts, his romantic endeavors with my friend failed. I asked her why she had rejected him. She replied in a somber tone, "There's something in his eyes that doesn't seem right." Juan Carlos was a quiet, discreet, slim guy with a big mustache and cowboy boots who enrolled in our school just to complete his final year. He moved from Guadalajara to our smaller town, nearly 600 kilometers away. Guadalajara was then, in the late 80s, home of the notorious group led by Mexico's original padrino, the Godfather, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo. In his 70s today, Gallardo is a historic figure in the world of global drug trafficking. He transformed transnational organized crime by assigning territories across the country to distinct cocaine trafficking groups, later self-identified as the Gulf, Juárez, Tijuana, and Sinaloa cartels. Protected by corrupt authorities, Gallardo's own Guadalajara cartel operated as an umbrella for smaller groups that worked mostly within the Golden Triangle, a mountainous area located between the states of Durango, Sinaloa, and Chihuahua, towards the country's northwest. Because of its altitude, weather, and access to the US border and the Pacific Ocean, the region is ideal for harvesting marijuana and heroin, and then smuggling into the world's largest illicit drug market. One of the organizations doing this work and doing it under the protection of the Guadalajara cartel was led by the father of my new classmate. As the school year continued, Juan Carlos revealed more about himself. He was the first person I had ever met with a connection to the drug trade. That said, he never offered me or any other students marijuana joints, heroin balls, or carefully folded packages of cocaine. As I look back to 1988, it was clear Juan Carlos had learned to be careful. He was being groomed to inherit his father's place as the leader of a drug trafficking organization. One day that spring, classes finished early, and Juan Carlos surprised some friends and me with an invitation to spend the day at his family's place at the suburbs. The place was a farm with a spacious 2-bedroom house, a separate bungalow, and a barn located in a semi-rural area outside of the city. The property was well known in the community because it was enclosed by walls as tall as any other house in the area and was often visited by small groups of brand new pickup trucks with tinted windows. Word on the street was that the house was owned by someone influential, either a politician or a drug lord, who enjoyed throwing parties that frequently extended for days and included beautiful women and famous musicians, all hired to perform. Minutes after we arrived at the property, our host left in his white pickup truck. About 30 minutes later, he returned with beer, ice, and chips, lots of them. That was the first of many parties, all-inclusive ones, that Juan Carlos threw for his classmates. And they quickly turned him into the most popular guy at school. He seemed to enjoy his new status, despite the quiet, calm personality that he maintained even after drinking a few beers. I don't remember ever seeing him drunk, even as the parties raged around him. Perhaps because our relationship had begun before his surge in popularity, and because my family made sure I wasn't a partier like most of our classmates, my friendship with Juan Carlos matured in trust. That gave me a chance to know who he really was, and to confirm that my friend had meant when she said something about his eyes didn't seem right. "Do you like guns?" Juan Carlos asked me one day as we were driving across the town on his pickup. "Oh, yeah, I do like guns. Who doesn't?" I replied. My attitude was typical teenager macho stupid, deeply influenced by the culture of weapons that still exists in northern Mexico. He smiled, and as he continued driving, pulled a Colt 38 Super Pistol out of from under his seat. It was an automatic gun popular among drug traffickers, particularly among those working up in the mountains, because of its reliability, heft, and firepower. "Have you seen one of these?" he asked, handing it to me. I grew up in a small town where men carried guns, so seeing a pistol was not unusual. But handling a loaded one without adult supervision was a new experience, as exciting as it was imprudent. After holding the gun for a few minutes, and once the initial excitement passed, the future journalist in me came out. "Why do you need to carry a gun?" I asked. Juan Carlos smiled. "You never know when it may be helpful to have it with you." As the end of the term approached, my admiration for Juan Carlos was diluted by the excitement of plans to move to a new city to begin my undergrad studies in communications. One day after school, during the final weeks of classes, Juan Carlos and I talked about our futures. He told me he will be moved back to Guadalajara to study business administration in a private university. Again, my incipient reporter rose up and I asked, "Why do you want to study that?" I guess I judged the book by its cover, because in my view, Juan Carlos didn't fit the mold of an entrepreneur, store manager, or businessman, particularly when driving a pickup with a loaded gun. He looked at me and smiled, and bam! A glimpse of the person taking shape behind the mustache appeared. My family thinks I need to go to school and learn business administration. They think it would be the best for us and for nuestro negocio, our business, he said, as his facial expression hardened. Right in front of me, he transformed from a quiet high school student with an into a cold-hardened adult. I required no additional explanations to understand the nature of the business and the source of the money, the house in the suburbs, the need for a gun, and the secrecy Juan Carlos always kept about his family and himself. His future plans involved becoming part of the new generation of drug kingpins, more educated, not addicted to drugs, tech-savvy, and with a less flamboyant lifestyle than their predecessors. An awkward silence, then an unexpected invitation. Would you like to work for us?
Thank you. The book is wonderful if you have the opportunity to pick up a copy. The Wolfpack. It goes on from there. I want to ask you, Luis, how many years did you spend as a journalist in Mexico covering the cartels and the drug trade?
I started my career in my second semester of university, 1989, and I left Mexico in 2008. As focusing on organized crime, violence, I would say since 1995. When I started, I was the first reporter who wrote about the femicides in Ciudad Juárez. If you are familiar with that, a lot of serial killer we had at the beginning, 1995, and I was there. I wrote those stories.
You survived many years in that environment.
Yeah.
My question is, at one moment you decided it's time to get out. Could you talk about that moment?
Well, the first, the situation is that things started to get worse as particularly after 2005, a year before the declaration from President Felipe Calderon against organized crime. This wasn't begin, or the situation didn't begin in 2006. It began a year before when, well, I will say 2001, when El Chapo Guzman escaped from the prison the first time. Right. He started to organize, to mastermind a plan, to started to seize the border, the whole northern border. And that's when I started to see things. I travel a lot from east to west, all across the border. But then the situation began to get closer to home. That's when Ciudad Juárez became the epicenter of the war on drugs. In that context is when I started to, the level of threats increased. And
Did I read, I think, that you were doing interviews with people both involved with the drug trade and law enforcement people.
Yep.
And didn't you do like 15 interviews, and all of those interviewees were eventually killed?
I don't remember. Well, I don't have the names, but I can tell. Actually, the other day I was talking to my brother-in-law in Juárez. He lives in Juárez, and we were just teasing. Oh yeah, I'll be there soon. And he said, "Don't worry. Probably the guy who wanted to kill you is dead." And I replied, "Well, maybe it's time for me to go and make you enemies." So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, probably a lot of them are killed for sure, and people that I knew for sure are dead.
Right. So when was it? When did you get up in the morning and say, "I have to get out of here and get my family out of here"?
I guess when the threats spread into my family, because when those threats were against me, I'm okay. I'm used to. You learn how to navigate in this environment, but then when the threats, when your family is threatened, that's when you say, you know what, this is not right, and that's the moment when we decided to flee.
Well, you have a couple of things. Just what is your opinion now on the war on drugs?
The war on drugs. It's complex. We have to understand there's a narrative of criminalization, and it's a narrative, us versus them, prompted by the United States, which has a lot of interest in Mexico's resources. So for them, it's very convenient. We have seen now with this Texas new charge against Mexican organized crime groups and the government. But in reality, think about it. They are chastising the Mexican government because of fentanyl, but they never speak about cocaine. Why? Because fentanyl is visible. You can see the problem of fentanyl on the streets of the United States. And second, because fentanyl is killing the poor. So cocaine is, and this is something that I also question about Canada. We never talk about, here Canada, Vancouver has a lot of problems with fentanyl, blah, blah, Toronto, blah, blah, blah. We never talk about the massive amount of cocaine smuggled into Canada. In this book, we documented one single cell of organized crime from Guadalajara smuggling to Canada in 1 year, 20 tons of cocaine to be consumed here. And we never spoke about it.
Does it stay in Canada?
Most of them, yes. So it's a lot. So again, why the conversation is focusing on fentanyl? Because fentanyl is visible. Because fentanyl is the poor and the rich. So what about the rich who use cocaine? The guys who work here in downtown. Yeah. So that it's complex. Now we have the government, Mexican government, which is useless and corrupt. Yeah. So.
Okay. We're just to finish up. What I'd like to do is have Louis read a short essay, and I think it says a lot about Canada in terms of dealing with refugees that come here looking for protection, peace, and prosperity.
Yes. Okay. Well, before I finish, thank you again. Okay, this is called 14 Years and One Tweet. On September 27, 2022, on our 14th anniversary of arriving in Canada, seeking refuge after fleeing Mexico to survive death threats from organized crime and corrupt officers, I signed my contract as a part-time janitor in a supermarket in Toronto. Ironically, the next day, I was introduced at a conference at the University of Ottawa as an award-winning journalist in exile, an author published by the world's largest printing house. After 2 days of inspiring interaction with activists in exiles, I returned to Toronto and prepared for my first early morning shift cleaning toilets and mopping floors, the second time for a living on Canadian soil. Hours later, I shot a couple of photos and posted them on Twitter with the following text, quote, "Because 2 master's degrees from local universities are not enough for a refugee to get a seat at the table with the good Canadian society, here I am, back to be a janitor again after 11 years of studying, applying, and publishing," close quote. With an uncomfortable sense of relief after venting my grievances online, I turned on my phone and returned to work. To my surprise, my tweet became a forum with almost 500,000 impressions and more than 47,000 interactions from both sides of the political spectrum. Some were empathic, some aggressive. Overwhelmed by the unintended attention to my post, I realized there is a need for Canada to evolve as a country, to transition from being refugee-friendly to becoming immigrant-embracing, where experience overseas is recognized, integrated, and promoted within Canada's social and economic fabric. I have been 14 years in this country, navigating from lining up outside food banks in the suburbs of Vancouver to high-table dinners at Massey College. As a newcomer in 2008, my survival jobs included delivering community papers, painting houses, replacing windows, and cleaning 5 different buildings. My wife is here, an experienced human resources specialist back in Mexico, also worked as a housekeeper in the mornings while I cared for our 3 children. In 2011, we moved to Toronto after I had a scholarship from Massey College as a journalism fellow. A new world was revealed to me as I transitioned from a protected person to a permanent resident and from a night cleaner to a guest speaker. During my fellowship, I understood that journalism in Canada was, and is, unfortunately, in a dire situation. After Massey, I enrolled in the Monk School of Global Affairs for a master's degree, which will help me to reinvent my career using my Spanish and professional background as foundations. After 2 years and considerable student loan debts, however, my hypothesis proved wrong, even after receiving Canadian citizenship. Many unsuccessful cover letters and crafted resumes later, I redirected my efforts toward academia and applied to 4 different PhD programs across the country. None of them wanted me. In 2015, the Toronto Star hired me as a content editor for the Star Touch app. But after 6 months, the project failed. And as one of the last to be hired, I was among the first to be let go. From there, another fellowship and some casual gigs helped me to pay only the minimum credit card balance while taking care of my wife during her 2-year-long excruciating cancer treatment that involved 11 rounds of chemo, 22 sessions of radiation, a 10 hours long lung surgery, and an unexpected lung operation. Then, my second attempt at reinvention brought me to study and complete in just 1 year a master's in disaster and emergency management at York University with additional diplomas in Latin America and global security studies. I also co-authored a book, The Wolfpack, on drug cartels and Canadian millennials, which has been praised as an eye-opener and a warning of how the dangerous tentacles of Mexican organized crime groups have extended into Canadian soil and the deadly consequences of this. This was my job and my duty as a journalist in Mexico. And although it is not my job anymore, it still is my responsibility to my fellow Canadians to expose such ugly truths. Nevertheless, in late 2022, the only position I got an interview for was the janitorial one, a job I kept for 2 months until an early morning email invited me to apply for a position as a seasonal teacher's assistant in Toronto's Metropolitan University School of Journalism. Apparently, among the thousands of viewers of my cyber rant, someone thought I could be a good fit for the position. My contract will end in 3 more weeks. The world is not the same as in 1969 when Canada signed the United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees. As knowledge and information have become more accessible and interconnected, more people have rebelled against injustice, fought for democracy, and/or denounced criminals. Many of us have fled our countries, and some have come to Canada for safety, carrying our most valuable possessions: our minds, our professional experiences, and our human dignity. Doctors, farmers, teachers, journalists, and many more have received a second chance to survive in Canada, but not to live fully as Canadians because of prejudice, fear, or ignorance. I believe it is time for society and government to embrace, meaning adapt, adopt, and expand the skills, knowledge, and experiences of all Canadians towards the common good, from newcomers to First Nations. I know there's not enough room for some professions. Therefore, education is essential to reinvent, reorient, or rediscover who we are. Please, please, let us pay Canada back with all that we have and be as diverse as we are. Thank you.